All right, guys and girls, I'm back with another one. But before I get started, if you like this sort of content, like, follow, subscribe, and comment. It helps the YouTube algorithm, and I'd really appreciate it. So, in my discussions, the long discussions we had with John Erickson and Mike Maves, one of the topics that came up was I asked John to give me a what's in the bag during his professional uh, career, what he was playing, the latest and greatest. He pointed out that he was playing a Maxfly Pro Special Irons. Okay, so actually, I had bought up the Australian blade. Now, the Australian blade is a world famous iron. Um, it originated in Australia, obviously, and the reason uh, the Australians had to resort to their own club making was because there was a tariff imposed on those kinds of things, recreational things, in Australia at the time, and the tariff was somewhere near 50% of any imports. So they got to work and started doing their own clubs. And Slazenger, don't see that brand as often anymore, but they were a premier golf brand in the 60s, 70s, 80s, into the 90s. Player played on Gary Player was a Slazenger staff member, Sevi Ballesteros, and the list goes on and on. So Slazenger in Australia evolved as a premier club making company, and Slazenger is a branch of Dunlop. Dunlop owns Maxfly, owns Slazenger, owned can't think of the other one, but anyway, at the time there was a famous club maker there called Sandy Fakney. And this guy was a master craftsman. So American guys would come down and play the Australian Open and look at these fine crafted blades and just fall and, drool all over them. I think it's really kind of unclear or very cloudy how the clubs got to America, but the way most people say it, the way the story is told, is that Lee Trevino went down there in '69, and he got paired up or played with David Graham. David Graham was an old school PGA professional in that, you could give David Graham a block of wood and he'd give you back a persimmon driver. And he had also worked at a forging plant where they were forging clubs. So he knew club making inside out. In fact, his colleagues would bring him the clubs to, tweak and repair and all that stuff. But the way it went was Trevino fell in love with Graham's clubs. Graham told him he should go see Sandy Fakney, right? Sandy Fakney is a guy who was behind the Australian blade, in my opinion. But that club itself is a cult classic, and it deserves its own video. So I will go into that at some other point. There are a couple of good videos on YouTube that discuss the history of the Australian blades. One, this guy Crash Test Dummy did a really good one, and there's another gentleman, a British or an Australian gentleman that did a really good, genealogy of this blade. But for this video, we just want to talk about Trevino goes and he hooks up with Sandy, and Sandy makes him a set of blades. And by the way, the Dunlop Australian blade was forged and manufactured, but the ultimate step in the process was the hand grinding by Sandy Fakney. Now, Trevino has Sandy make him these clubs, and he's in love with these clubs. goes out and he wins like the first 3 or 4 majors he's played. He had to, you know, blotch out the back for endorsement reasons because he's always been like a top flight Spalding guy, but he won those majors with Australian blades. Somewhere along the line, Trevino decided something went wrong with his whatever, with his mojo, and he decided to drill holes into them, drill some weight out of them, and they were never the same. And they talked to him today, and he says, "I cry every time I think about." Uh, he still has them. He says, and he says he looks at them, he cries every time he thinks about it, something like that, for dramatic effect. But anyway, John is playing uh, a version of those called the Pro Specials. Now, the Australian blade was made under that brand, Australian blade, all the way through to 83, 82, around there. Then in 85, they introduced the Pro Special, and those were the clubs that John was playing. Now, just to put things in perspective, so I was a member of the Nassau Players Club, whose home course is Bethpage Black, back in the days, in the 90s or so. And we were all very good players at the time, near scratch, 2, 3 handicaps, plus sevens, anything counted. And we were all most of us played blades, but nobody nobody would go near a set of Australian blades. They were just, you had to you had to be on point. You had to be on point to carry them. You were sporting a set of those Australian blades from that time, from that era. You were a real baller. You were, you were balling. You were a baller. But anyway, let's get into John describing his set makeup during his playing days. Thanks. So, John, when you were playing, what give me a what's in the bag.
When I was on
Professionally.
tour?
Yeah, playing professionally on tour.
Okay, I had a Tony Penna driver, persimmon.
Circa
With
what? What year would that be?
it was it was a 19 like early 70s, I think.
Okay.
It was yeah, Tony Penna with kind of a big, big block, pretty deep face. I carried the McGregor Iomatic 2-wood. I had another 4-wood I'd put in the bag, another Iomatic 4-wood. I used Australian blade 1-iron, and then I was hitting the Maxfly Pro Specials, which were the next evolution of the Australian blade at the time. When the Pro Specials came out, I mean, great blade. I used taper tipped X100s, tipped about 1.5 inches, and ran those through. I just carried pitching wedge, and then I had my sand wedge. I would carry like an R90, one of the not.
Yeah.
I want to say original because the ones that say original are not original. I mean, actually had an R90 from the 40s. Yeah,
There you
yeah.
go.
So
But
yeah,
now you
that was
have
it.
you have
Putters I messed around with. I had different. I've used everything from a TPM3 to cash in to whatever I could. But the one that I won Windsor with was a Spalding. Was a TPM 5 or something like
yeah, I
that.
know which one that is, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Now,
the one.
but so historically, right, the Australian blades are butter knives. I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh,
they were
this Pro Special is even
you
more
need to
butter
be
knife than
you need
that.
to be able to you need to be able to game your damn ball and play those fucking clubs. I mean, you
Yeah,
got
I've always had a good golf swing. I never had trouble with the gear. That
but then
was
I mean, you're tipping your shaft, so you're playing X300,
yeah.
weighing in at X100 weight, right? But the stiffness of these things, with Australian with these Max
Match
Fly
Pro
blades,
Specials, which were the Australian. It was even a more bladey,
yeah.
thin
I mean, the only
strap.
guy I remember on tour playing those was Blaine McAllister. Somebody he was like the only guy. But anyway, so you're winning on tour with this setup, huh? You have to be a good ball striker to carry that. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I was always one of the better ball strikers on the tour. I think, the putting, like I say, it's relative. I mean, if I go back home, I'm a good putter relative to guys around the club and stuff like that, right? I mean, but
Mhm.
when you get out there, I would say I was in the like 20 percentile putting, and I would say in the 80 percentile ball striking. I remember playing with Grant Waite at the BC Open in Vancouver. I'd hit every fairway, every green. The last hole at Point Grey is a tight dog leg right. I had the honor. I got up there, just hit this bullet out there, just fade, just shapes the thing perfectly. And Grant just looks at me and just goes, "How good are you hitting it?" Was like, and it was,
Wow.
but that's Grant Way was considered, one of the premier ball strikers out there. So I mean, I took that as kind of like a joking compliment, but he was serious. I mean, I could hit it with Grant, if we're out there playing together and we were both hitting it well, it was going to be a flag fest out there. But we weren't, hitting it like Mo. I mean, it wasn't
Yeah, yeah, but he was,
that kind of thing, but just for the guys out there, yeah, there were Dave Barr, was a guy that hit it better than I did, I thought. I played with Dave in the Winnipeg Open, and I mean, that was a clinic watching that guy. I mean, he just, two irons, just, I mean, he was
well, Dave
there
Barr is
was, and Jerry,
self-taught.
great
According to
striker,
Dave Barr, nobody's ever given him a golf lesson.
didn't need a golf lesson. Not when you hit it like that guy did, you know.